Hello, I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh, and this is my Writing for Change podcast. On this podcast, you'll hear from both myself and other writers who write for change. Today, I'm interviewing author Judy Stanigar about her book, Marika's Best Laid Plans, and her other work of writing and working for change. Judy is an author, a traveler, an academic, a psychotherapist, and a storyteller. She has published two books, A Quartet in Love, and most recently, Marika's Best Laid Plans. She also just finished her third book about Israel, where she grew up. Please join me in welcoming Judy Stanigar. Well, welcome, Judy Stanigar. It's great to have you on the Writing for Change podcast today. And I just wanted to start by asking you to tell me a little bit about yourself and how you became a writer.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on your show. I'm a psychotherapist, and so I believe so much in change. But I started writing when I was a kid. I grew up in Israel, and so started keeping a diary from a very young age and always thought I would be a writer, but I kept postponing actually taking on writing as a profession because I got sidetracked into going to college, getting a degree, and working. And then when I started, I kind of started semi-retirement in working less, and I thought, well, now it's now or never. And that's when I started writing about 10 years ago or so.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I like the writing for the artist's way for retirement. It says it's never too late to begin again.
Never too late.
And she recommends getting in touch with your passion. So it sounds like writing's been a passion all your life, but now you have the luxury of spending time to devote to your
Right,
passion.
right. And I grew up in a family that, insisted kind of on, okay, writing, it's all very nice and good, but you've got to have a profession.
Yeah. So
You got to bring your weekly salary in, which I understand given their background. But yes, absolutely. It's never too late. We stop ourselves.
yes. And you might have been a millionaire writer by now if they hadn't told you that, but who knows?
Yeah, yeah. And that's the other thing I preach a lot as a therapist is that uh, regret is such a fantasy because I could have been a failed writer.
Yeah,
But of course, in the fantasy is, oh, if only I had done that, I would have been a bestseller.
yeah, you just don't know.
Right.
Well, when I said I was interested in interviewing authors who write for change, I saw you speak up, saying, oh, interview me. So tell me a little bit about your writing and your books and the way you're hoping you might bring some change in your writing.
Okay. So the change that I set out to write was more, again, it's the therapist in me in a way writing, which is an individual change, and change is the hardest thing to do for anybody.
Mhm.
And I started my career working with drug addicts, so I know that was one of the area with addiction. It is so hard to change. So my first novel, I looked back at my years at college, and as an adult, of course, I looked back and I had a different take on what love meant at different stages in life and how it changes. So my first novel, which was A Quartet in Love, I think, yeah, it's about four couples and each in different stages of life, the college kids, the young 20s, 30 something, and the 40 something, and going through their own relationships and love and how they look at it from different points of views because, love changes too in relationships as we mature, hopefully. And my second book, Marika's Best Laid Plan, is really about an individual who's having an idea of how she's going to change her predicament in life, her situation, without realizing no, it's not the situation that needs to change. It's you who need to change. And the novel takes her through that metamorphosis of sorts, you know. So that's my take on change. Because I spend my life work is helping people actually change their circumstances and change themselves.
Yeah, so Marika's best laid plan didn't quite go the way she wanted, and maybe she ended up in a better place than she could have even envisioned for herself.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what happens because the change she was going for was not a real change. It was just kind of uh, changing some circumstances. She thought, oh, if only that would change, I'd be happy. If I could only change my circumstance. And of course, that was not the recipe for happiness. She really had to change herself.
And it was interesting, her solution was to go back to the relationship that hadn't worked. And she was figuring out if that could work, then everything would be fine.
Exactly.
That wasn't quite. I was just curious, as a psychotherapist, do you encourage your clients to have a plan to institute change, or like Marika
Yes,
did?
I do, and yes, because there are certain steps. I always tell my clients in therapy, yeah, the first step is awareness. You have to figure out what it is that you're doing that's not working and what are the obstacles. But once you figure it out, awareness is not going to cause change by itself. How many people know that cigarette smoking, they have the awareness that it's bad for you, and that by itself doesn't make them stop smoking? So change requires action. And that's how we change in the doing. So I encourage client, if you're going to make a change, set yourself up for doing something that's going to work for you. Uh, are you okay? Okay. Um, for example, if someone wants to lose weight, um, I would say, what were your obstacles all along? So you don't set yourself up again. So if your plan is I'm going to go to the gym every day, and the gym means going every day means getting up very early, driving pretty distant, and it hasn't worked before, don't do it again. Set yourself up for success. So make some sort of plan for success, and it's got to be incremental.
Yeah, so I read your book, Marika's Best Laid Plan, and it did sound like she had a very difficult job, which I guess you had yourself, trying to help people overcome drug addiction. And I do hear that one day at a time. And maybe that's the incremental thing that you can do, is just look one day ahead. For today, I'm going to be sober. Today, I'm not going to use. But I understand that's so difficult for clients to overcome drug addiction. So what kind of things do you do to encourage your clients on their path to change? I guess
Okay.
maybe you just kind of explained that, but
Okay. So yes, I mean you're absolutely right. I do encourage clients, to take an inventory. Where's your head at in the morning? Is it in the past, in the future, or in the present? And in order to really implement change, your head better be in the present, because we don't know what tomorrow brings. Yesterday is gone. And if you do what you need to do today, if you focus on today, tomorrow will take care of itself. So I'm very much into trying to focus. Yeah, you have a goal in mind, but you have to break it down into small, doable things.
that's
And that,
when writing, I found writing is that way too. I have 7 books and I don't know how I got 7 books, but all I know is that every day I devote a little bit of time. And when I was working full time, that might have been a half an hour. But I mean, I think that is, you just focus on the present and eventually you get there. Yeah.
yeah, and it's so simple, but yet seems to be so hard to do. I know I feel the same as a writer. I mean, always thinking of, yeah, I will. That's not going to get it. You just got to sit down and, clear the mind and say, this is what I'm doing now.
Well, the story, Marika was definitely in a difficult job with people who were struggling with their drugs and the groups and the recidivism, but also one of the patients gets AIDS, and it's just really heartbreaking, just as she's starting to find the life she wants. That's really hard.
Yes,
I thought you wrote very realistically, and you must have lived that experience with your clients. You said you worked in a methadone clinic yourself?
yes, yes. One of the feedbacks that I keep getting repetitively is from people who read it is that it feels so realistic.
Mhm.
And one of the things I set out when I wrote this is to be real, not to necessarily, I don't want to write a novel to make people feel good or feel bad. I want to describe the reality and make what you will of it. So I lived it. I worked for quite a few years in a methadone clinic. Many of the years I was the supervisor there, and I saw this struggle. I mean, I don't, it's easier said than done, focus on today, but when today is so horrible, uh, partly due to how you dealt with life before, even people who really truly want to change, the situation they created in life is so hard that they feel like this is impossible to do. I can't undo the mess I'm in.
Yeah.
So they kind of give in. It's loss of hope. And that's the other thing I feel. Uh, Before my editor said to me that she didn't think my original title was that good, great, and she was right. I have a poem in the beginning with Emily Dickinson that about hope is that thing with feathers, because I think that in order for change to occur, first you must have hope.
What was
And
the original title?
hope is that thing with feathers.
Well, oh, but
Yeah.
that's nice too. So we've been talking on here a lot about personal change, and I remember that quote that the only thing we really can change is ourselves. But history is also full of dramatic movements that do produce change. And I just wondered, what's your perspective on participating in positive change for society as a whole?
Well, it's interesting. I was just reading something in the Times about it. Someone was writing about the change in the Democratic Party that needs to happen. But he's talking about that the change, in my opinion, historically, and I did start my life with, before I switched to become a therapist, I was a student. I did my graduate work in political science. And I think that uh, movements are necessary and they're part of life, right? They say the only thing that you can count on is change because things change. And but I think that they don't change without some sort of pain that individuals must sacrifice in order to make movements occur, political movements, whether it's a personal sacrifice of some of my time has to be devoted to it, or whether it's a sacrifice of, okay, I'm willing to pay more taxes, or whatever the sacrifice is. But if individuals are not, they're always looking at let somebody else do the hard work, it makes change so much more difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. Right now, it feels like we need a lot of change, and it's hard to figure out sometimes what bandwagon to get on. But
Yeah.
We definitely need to be doing things, I know.
Oh, absolutely.
So what's next on the horizon for you? Are you writing a third book? Or
I just completed a short while ago my third book, which is a memoir, not so much about myself, but of the country I was born in, Israel. And I was born when Israel was young itself. My parents were Holocaust survivors and just arrived in Israel. And so they weren't uh, unusual or unique. Half the population or more were Holocaust survivors who arrived. So there was a whole um, feeling of, speaking of change that the arrivers were looking for and what it was like to live there. So I just completed that novel, but I haven't really tried sending it out there to market it because I feel the political movement is right now not open to my book. The winds of change are not in my favor at this moment. So
you're going to wait a little while until things change?
yeah, change again. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
Anything else I'd like to mention? Yes, and that is often people are afraid of change and that the fear stops them. And while I understand we get comfortable,
Mhm.
even in our discomfort, I want to wish people the courage to change because usually, if you have a vision, you can make it happen.
I like that. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we aren't realizing how stuck we may be and
Exactly.
how change may really open up our lives in new ways.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Well, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thank you for
Nice
having
to
me.
meet you, and I look forward to I'm going to trying to read the Quartet of Love, but I enjoyed Marika's Best Laid Plan, and I know other people will also. So
Thank you.
thank you. You can find Judy online at her website at judystanigar.com. That's JUDYSTANIGAR.com, and also on Facebook as Judy Stanigar Author. Thank you for coming, and you can find out more about me and my writing for change on my website at nancyflinchbaugh.com or check out my YouTube channel, Nancy Flinchbaugh, and also find me on Facebook at Nancy Flinchbaugh Author. Have a great day.